Alrighty, so today we're going to be working through a computer mouse. So industrial design, we're going to be using the standard tools that we learnt in level 1. So we've got our G for grab, we've got our S for scale, R for rotate, along the X, the red line, the Y, the green line, and the Z axis, which is the up and down line. We're going to be using a bit of the loop cut. We're going to be using a little bit of the extrude tool. We're also going to be learning a couple of new tools, such as the subdivision surface, a very, very powerful yet kind of confusing tool. We're going to be learning about the Boolean tool, which is going to make sense soon. And finally, we're going to be learning a little bit more about lighting and materials. So trying to make sure that we get all of those down pat. Now, as we normally start, we've started with our little default cube. I'm going to hit the GZ1 button to put that cube onto the ground. So so always make sure that you start by placing your object onto the ground. It normally just defaults to being in the middle of the ground, which you kind of don't want. We're going to go Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. So this means that as I scale it, it just scales upwards and slides along that ground there. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the basic forms of a mouse. Now, of course, if you're using a computer, or particularly if you're at a desktop, you've probably got a pretty good reference to a mouse sitting in your right hand. So make sure that you reference that. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what they look like. That's kind of going to be uncovered a little bit more, my observations as to what a mouse form is as we go through it. So let's get started. S, Y to stretch our mouse, S, X to stretch it that way. So as per any modeling, you want to start by just doing what the absolute basic, most simple version of it looks like. And that is basically what kind of a box would it fit in. I'm going to hit Tab to go into my edit mode now, and I'm going to loop cut and click and drag my loop cut back a bit. I'm going to loop cut down the middle here as well. And now I'm going to grab my select box and basically grab my lines, click holding shift, grab these ones here, G and Z to move them down. I'm going to grab these outside lines here, rotate around, click, holding shift to click them all, S and X, and that just scales them all inwards equally. So that's pretty good. We're starting to kind of get to roughly what you would expect a mouse to look like. I'm going to grab these bottom ones, G and Y, to kind of push that back a bit. Yeah, that's starting to come together reasonably well. I might just grab on these ones. I'm just going to grab this middle one here. So I've gone into my little individual node select, G and Z. I'm going to, maybe grab these lines here. I could grab them with the line tool or just select both G and Y to kind of make it rounded out the front there. That one there, G and Y. Okay, so we've got a pretty basic version of what this mouse looks like so far. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to loop cut now, this middle bit, click and drag it up because we want this to be kind of a sharp edge. And the reason I'm doing this is going to make a lot more sense when we do the subdivision surface. And I'm going to do the same with the bottom. I'm going to click and drag down. And then I'm just going to click one in the middle here, just for good measure. Make a bit more sense why I'm doing that soon also. All right, so that's all starting to look pretty good. What I'm going to do, one final thing, click my little selectee, grab this. One final thing before we get too far into it. I want to just click this middle one, G, and bring this back a lot. Now, obviously, these are kind of going to be our buttons, so you can kind of see maybe why I did that. If not, it'll make a bit more sense in a sec. Finally, or one more thing before we do our subdivision, I'm going to grab, do a loop cut in the middle here. You'll find, oops, click there, that computer mouses, turns out they're called, not mice apparently, have kind of a big indent here, which is where the thumb goes, especially the really more expensive ergonomic ones. So I'm just going to push this in a bit, S and X, to push that in, and you can kind of see that it's got that ergonomic kind of look now. All right, so now we're going to go into our subdivision surface. So basically, we've got our mouse. Obviously, this is looking really blocky. It looks like what a mouse would have looked like if it had been designed for the video game Doom or something maybe. Clicking on our little spanner here, clicking on Add Modifier, and we're going to go to Subdivision Surface. Now, you may need to scroll down, but Subdivision Surface there. And what it's done is it's basically rounded off our mouse. This Levels viewer here, you want to bump that up, and as you can see, we've now got this really smooth looking computer mouse. It's probably a little bit too smooth, so this is where we need to start sharpening up, and once this has been done, we can start moving individual nodes. If I go back into the edit mode, tab, we can see that our little controllers are still the same way that they used to be, so we've actually still got a lot of control over the design. So what I'm going to do is I want to sharpen up these edges. So I'm grabbing these, holding the shift button, and I'm going to select them all the way around, like so. And I'm going to hit Shift E, really, really cool tool, Shift E, and I'm just going to drag away. And as you can see, that's kind of sharpened up those edges, and it sort of softened them off at certain parts as well. So really, really cool tool. I'm going to do the same with the base as well. Now, a cool tool to learn here is if I hold the Alt button, or maybe the Command button if you're on an Apple, and click, it'll actually select the whole way round. So you don't need to go ahead and try to click the whole thing. So Shift and E, and I'm just going to sharpen that off as well. And G, Z, just kind of bring it up a bit. So you can see that's got a nice sharp line. So what I want to do now is I'm just going to have a look around, look for areas that could be improved. I think this is a bit too tall and the back's a little bit too tall, so I might just go back into my edit mode. I'm going to select this line here, oh, these lines here as well, all of these front lines, G and Z, like so, and that's actually creating kind of a cool little lip out the front there. Now I'm going to do the same with the back. Grab that one, G and Z. Maybe these two as well. 1, 2. G and Z, just a little bit. I actually want to drag this one, these ones down. Oops. G and Z. I hit the H button there, which you don't want to hit, it turns out. All right, so that's all looking pretty good. There's a bit of a lump here, so you know and this is what it's about. Once you do that subdivision surface, you can kind of grab the individual nodes and just kind of move them about to make them work for you. G and Z. So yeah, I'd say that's looking pretty good. All right, so that's got our basic mouse shape. So hopefully you've learnt a few different things about that model. Obviously, I can go in and make so many changes and add so many things to this, but this is just a level 2 tutorial, so I'm not going to go too far. I'm going to stick with a nice basic shape. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we want to add a little wheel as well. So Shift A to add brings me to my mesh, and I'm going to go this cylinder. Before you click away from that, you've got to click on this little thing, and we want to change the vertices probably to, let's go 99. Probably could have gone 100. Look at us go. R, Y, 90 to rotate it, that 90 degrees. And I'm going to click on my little X here to straighten that up. I'm going to click there and put that there. S, X to shrink it down. So we've got our little scroll wheel here. I'm going to go back to my Y. Probably just shrink it down a bit more and kind of just have it poking out just that little bit. Something like that should be fine. Now I'm just going to refine this a bit. It'll look a bit strange with a really hard edge. So I'm going to grab my extrude, oops, and the face here. Extrude that one out a bit, and S to shrink. and probably could have extruded them both at the same time so that it was a bit, so that there's a bit of uniformity there, but I'm just going to do this by eye for the purpose of the demonstration. There we go, we've got a little scroll wheel. And now I want to add just one more little thing, is I want to add like a little kind of rubber patch here. So I'm going to Shift A, add another sphere, still got my 99, RY 90, SX. So this is where the Boolean tool is going to come in. So S and X. Now I'm going to click our little X button there. I'm going to put that in place. I'm going to do some fancy footwork. So I'm going to talk you through this. Hopefully I'm not confusing you too much as I talk though. S and Z to kind of shrink it down to a bit of an oval shape. S and Z. G to kind of move it back. So I think that's kind of nice and rounded on that side, but we kind of want it to push forward on this side. So this is where I'm going to get my proportional editing. New tool, go into my edit mode. I'm going to click one line towards the end here. I'm going to click my proportional editing and I'm going to click back to my X mode. Now I'm going to hit the G button. Watch this in slow motion if you need, because I just clicked a lot of buttons then. Click the G button and you can see I'm using my scroll wheel to scroll up and down. So you can see what it does is it proportionally grabs the rest of the circle based on how much you're scrolling up and down. So I think something like that, yeah, it looks pretty good. I might go ahead and grab that one, G, and kind of push that up a bit, because you kind of want it to follow the contours sort of as nice as you can. I'm not going to be too pedantic with this, and maybe kind of rotate it a bit there. Now that's not too bad. It's not great. I would have probably spent a lot more time, but I'm not wanting to waste your time here. So, all right, so now we're going to get this Boolean tool. So, and that's going to kind of make sense of this weird monstrosity that I've created here. Grabbing this, add modifier. So I'm in my little spanner here, add modifier, Boolean, intersect, and I'm going to grab this little eyedropper here and click on the mouse. See, what that's done is it's intersected everything that crosses between the mouse and the little sort of cylinder thing we've done. And now I'm just going to click apply. So if I hit S and X now, I'm just going to push that out a little bit, and you can kind of see that it's kind of created this little sort of rubber pad. All right, so now let's get into our materials. So we've done that. It's looking pretty good. Hopefully I've opened your eyes to a lot of different things you can do. You could probably, if you wanted to get more advanced, use the Boolean tool to create a little hole for that. You'd probably be using the Boolean tool to create the little gaps for the clickers. So you'd obviously notice that the buttons have little gaps there, but we're not going to get into that today. I'm just going to try to keep it a little bit more basic than that. Now let's go into our little viewport renderer. This is when we start adding our materials. So make sure you hit save as well as you're working through this. I get a bit excited. I don't hit save, and then I feel terrible when Blender crashes. All right, so we're going to grab our little camera here, change the render engine to cycles, and you can see much nicer kind of render. All right, now we want to add a ground. Shift A, mesh, plane, S, and just hit the 2 button a couple of times. That just doubles it and then doubles what it doubled. So that's looking all pretty good. Now this is going to be kind of a sleek, dark mouse that I'm doing here. So I'm just going to make it a black background. I'll show you how to do that. Grab your little world here, color, and I'm just going to drag that to, let's just make it fully black and we'll see what happens. Material over here, so I'm working on the plane now. New, and I'm going to make that material really black as well. I'm going to go make it much more metallic and perhaps drop the roughness. So you can kind of see that we've got this sort of reflective ground. So hopefully you can kind of take a few of those lessons from the previous tutorial into that. Now we're going to grab our mouse, and I want to make the mouse kind of a grey as well. You don't want to make it too dark. Obviously, if it's really dark, you're not going to see anything because it's on a black background. But we are going to work with lighting as well. So I'm, yeah, just going ahead. And some pretty basics there. So you've kind of got this pretty sleek looking mouse. I'm going to add some LED lighting to it, so I think that's going to help a lot as well. Yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going now into my little spanner. Now, I'm just going to, so if we can see here, we've got our subdivision surface. Now, this is what I'm doing now is called destructive. So this is basically going to bake in my subdivision surface so I can no longer do any real general modeling anymore. So I'm going to click this down button and click apply. If we go into edit again, you'll see that it's converted that all to individual little shapes. So what I'm going to do now is I want to, create my little LED strips that are going to run along it. So again, holding that Alt button, I'm going to, click along. It takes a bit of getting used to making sure that you don't click and it selects this sort of Y-axis. You want it to select the other axis. The way that you can go about that, if I zoom in a lot, is to click on the exact line that it runs down. So I'm going to click on that. I'm also going to click on these lines here. And yeah, I think that should be a pretty cool little LED strip. Back into my materials, plus, new, assign. You can name it if you want. And I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to go to this emissions thing. And I'm going to bring that up and make that kind of a blue emission. And I might make the ignition strength, say, 15. So you can kind of see now you've got this really cool emission type thing happening there. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to S and Z to kind of shrink that down a little bit because it's kind of in the way now. So that's looking all pretty good. I'm just going to put a little emission on my wheel as well. So I'm just going to go to there, back to my little materials here, little plus. I'm going to click my thing and then click assign. All right, so we've got our cool little mouse happening here. Now, this is pretty much it. The only other thing you're going to want to do, and this is particular for tech, is that this is kind of a gaming mouse, so we want to get our lighting. So I've grabbed my light and I've just hit the G button to drag my light down. So I'm going to sort of move it over to here. That's looking pretty cool. So it's kind of lighting up that side. So it's all about the highlights now. And I'm going to change the color from this white to, perhaps a bit more of a, like kind of a purple over here. Now, obviously this side's way too dark. So I'm going to grab my light. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate. And I'm going to drag another light over here. Now I'm going to make that light kind of more of a blue light. So it's kind of got this multiple lighting happening now. So that's all looking pretty good. You've kind of got this cool reflection. It's a cool looking mouse. We're going to do our camera angles soon. A couple of little things. We might just grab our little material here and I'm going to drop the roughness down so it's a bit more shiny. And I'm going to bump the metallicness up a bit to kind of make it a shiny mouse. And I want to make this quite matte, so I'm going to soften that a lot. So I've clicked, that's my little rubber grip here. So that's looking pretty good. One final little thing that I'm going to do with this rubber grip is I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go into my edit mode. Now this is going to probably take just a little while, but holding the Alt button, I'm going to select every fourth. I'm rushing it a bit. I'm not selecting every fourth. I'm sort of selecting some every third, some every fifth, but you kind of get the idea. So I'm selecting all of them and I'm going to hit S and X. Oops. Turn my proportional editing off. That was left on from last time. S and X, and I'm just going to push those in. So what that's done is it's created these kind of cool ribs on the grip. So it sort of makes it look a bit more bumpy. I could do the same for the verticals as well. Yeah, you kind of get the idea. So yeah, that's all looking pretty cool. You've kind of got this sort of this ribbed kind of look going as well, which is pretty nice. You've got this reflection, which is not too bad. It might be a bit too metallic. Maybe we'll drop it down a little bit. and sort of maybe bump the roughness up. Drop the specular down. As I'd kind of mentioned before, you really just want to have a play with all of these things and see what they all do. All right, so now it's time to go into our little camera angle here. We can see, again, we want to grab this little thing, view, camera to view, and now I'm just going to grab a nice position for the mouse. Generally something like that. It's all about this kind of neon curve here, so you sort of want to make sure that that's exemplified the most. So something like that is pretty cool. You might want to do a couple of different camera angles if you're doing sort of a poster design. You might want to add a few sort of little unique things, like some extra little lights just to kind of make it look a bit more kind of techie looking. So I'm just going to grab a few here and here. Just going to assign those just to kind of, add a little bit more, points of interest to it. But that's effectively it. You've kind of got your mouse. It fades nicely into the background. It looks neat. This kind of grey stuff's going to disappear when you go to render. Looking pretty good. At the moment, I'm not going to worry about the click lines or the little gaps. You can definitely do them, but I just want to keep this tutorial just a little bit simple so that we'll sort of overlook them. You may just choose to add them in Photoshop, really easy to do. Otherwise, you could perhaps even just leave it and call it a sleek mouse. It's entirely up to you. But there's your mouse design. I'm going to hit the render button now. So while that's rendering out, oh, there we go. Look, I just set it at 4,000 samples. I'm going to click away from that. Drop our little samples down to 128. Should look pretty good. Render image. As I said, if it's super finished, you can hit the render button and go to bed. And set it at 4,000. It would look amazing. But yeah, it's going to take its time doing it. So there we go. We've created our cool little mouse. We've done some really nice lighting effects. Hopefully you can see the million different places that you can take this with these simple tools that we've learnt. The simple tools can get you a really nice effective result, as we can see, but hopefully you can see many, many different areas where you could continue to improve this. So that's going to render out. Hope you learnt heaps from that. Again, just familiarize yourself with G, S, and R, grab, scale, rotate, X, Y, and Z, forward, backwards, sideways, up and down, loop cut, extrude, that subdivision, really familiarize yourself with that. You can do some amazing stuff, a little bit of Boolean, and also just having that play with those materials. Awesome. Look forward to seeing what you come up with, and all the best with your designs.